Hi, everyone. Dr. Steve Rasner here. Welcome back to the Lionhearted Dental Podcast, dedicated to you, my colleagues that work in the front lines every day, just like I do. Dedicated to maximizing your potential that I know I'm capable of doing. So first, let me thank, I know you probably get bored of me thanking all the colleagues around the globe that download me, but that's why I do this. I like to share with as many of you as I can. And I quite honestly never had so many of you downloading, whether from United States, Canada, Germany, United Kingdom, Ireland, all at the same time. A lot of times it would vary, and I'd have the most in one country and then not that much in others. But I don't know. It seems like you guys appreciate it and are listening. And my job, I feel, is to keep giving you content that's worthwhile to make you keep listening. So here we go. Here's what the topic of this podcast this week, and I never know whether I can get through a subject in 1 week or not. So I might break it into two. I'm just going to start it and we'll find out. And the subject is this. I'm calling it the anatomy of an amazing day. In other words, you've heard me come on this podcast many times, and I tell you about a 3-day, 6-digit collection week, or a single day where we did crazy, crazy numbers. And those of you that may be tuning in for the first time ever, I always feel compelled to say to you, all right, I don't want ever anybody listening to the Lionhearted podcast host, which is me, thinking it's just about the money, because it isn't. There's many guys in this country, in this industry, that probably out-collect me pound for pound. I like to believe my brand and the brand of my Lionhearted colleagues that listen to me is one that you can be incredibly proud of in your community. Yeah, I could use cheap products, not care about my final product, line up and buy 5 more dental offices than the 2 that I have, and certainly put out some impressive numbers. But that's not just what the Lionhearted dentist is about. It's way more than that. It's about community. It's about being a great leader so you have staff for years and years and don't have to go through the challenges of replacing people. It's walking into or through your reception room in the morning and knowing and feeling that the people in that reception room that came to see you are pleased. They're really happy that you are their dentist. That's what it's all about. But unless you're listening, and maybe some of you are, and it's a nonprofit organization, why on earth would you not want to kill it? Why on earth would you not want to maximize everything about what you do in this profession, including your collections? And so when I give you those numbers, I don't always give you my numbers. Literally last week, on a 4-day week, my office, and by the way, last week, my other office was closed, collected $164,461.64. Yes, I guess I have it down to the penny. So how does that happen? How is it possible that you could do that out of one office? And that's what the subject is going to be, or 2 offices even. I want to be clear. I'm really proud of my second office, but it doesn't come anywhere close to accounting for the productivity and the collections and everything I do out of my primary office. And to be even clearer, I left that office about 12, 13 years ago, and I did 4 million plus alone out of that office. Alone, one office for many years. So don't confuse the fact that, or even delude yourself of the possibility that these numbers come because I have 2 equal offices, because I don't. So how do we get there? Where does this day come from? Because you must think that at times. Oh my God, he did blah, blah, blah. And one more thing about the money. I don't care if you do a third of what I do or 20%. If you're living life on your own terms, this is just me preaching, I guess, meaning you can work when you want to work and you can take off when you want to take off because you can afford to. So when you leave your office because you want to go see your children who just moved to a new house in Arizona, or you're going to a wedding or something and you want to make a trip out of it, you can do those things because you're not worried about your office collapsing when you're gone. That's what I mean by living your career on your own terms. So it doesn't matter what that number is, and the number would be wrong to me if you're stressed out and you've wrecked your personal and family life. Look, I mean this. I'm not saying what I'm saying because I want to sound good. I mean it because I've experienced a lot of the mistakes that I am asking you not to make. Not everything, but you could always do it better than the person that's teaching you, which is me. So do that. So, how do we do this? Well, I've thought about this before I started this podcast today. So, how does that day evolve? And I'm positive about what I'm going to say to you, and you're going to be very surprised. It actually starts with who's doing the confirmations of the appointments. Think about it for a minute. Think about walking in your office next week, okay? Has this ever happened to you? You walk in your office and it's a Monday, and the opening and your hygienist's first patient's not there. Okay? I bet that happens a lot to you. And it's early in the day and it's early in the week, so you're not that bent out of shape by it because, you got the whole day and a whole week to have that not happen again. But that shouts to me. If I have a first patient, I'm going to tell you why in a second, of a day not come in, I think that's sloppy confirming. I absolutely do. So we're going to talk about how the schedule impacts this day. There's many things that impact this day, but we're going to talk about how the schedule does that. in two different venues, and that would be the hygiene department and then the doctor's schedule. So, hygiene, I've always said this as I spoke live, is the most predictable profit center in your office. I'm going to say it again, the most predictable profit center in your office. I didn't say it was the most profitable. Obviously, that's not true. But it's predictably profitable, meaning that if you put 8 patients in a hygiene schedule, you are positively going to profit. And there's not everything you can say that you do that falls under that umbrella. Examples. Do you ever do a single crown on an anterior tooth? Has the shade always been spot on? So when it's not spot on, what happens? You still had to numb the patient that day, probably. You had to take the temporary off. Sometimes it's an anterior and it's a core buildup underneath. You cut that temporary off. So then you have to make a new temporary before they leave. And then they come back in 4 weeks for an appointment that was not factored in to your profitability. And if it's a single central or lateral, it's often wrong the second time. By the way, it's not a great idea to do. So one of the things you'll learn over your career is, if the adjacent tooth that you're trying to match has any need whatsoever for, or if it's loaded with character that you can never match, it's not the worst idea in the world to veneer that tooth, the adjacent tooth. That's just one clinician's opinion. So, if it's a perfect virgin tooth, gorgeous, yes, you're going to go for one. But I'm just making a point for you. And other things we could do the same thing. I've had the implant transfer inadvertently rotate when we took an impression, or something went wrong when we did a scan, and when we went to insert it, it did not go in. Well, nobody factors that into their profitability, right? Or God forbid, implant dentistry and the surgical aspects of it. Sometimes we go in, do we not? And our intention is to place the implant the day of the extraction, but we can't. Well, you don't get to charge again for the fact you were going to put the implant in that day. So my point is, that doesn't happen in hygiene. No one comes out of hygiene and says, wow, could you clean me again? I guess in your career and your history, that in fact could happen, but we're trying to be, reasonable here in this talk I'm having with you. And generally, hygiene is not something that you have to repeat. So it becomes a very profitable center. So because of that, it's a great idea to make sure it is confirmed properly and fully. And let me tell you something. In 42 years of doing this, I've had very, very good confirmers, people that confirm that schedule. And I have people that just put their time in and confirm, and they do call all the patients. They just leave messages with 5-year-olds or on a tape machine, or they'll schedule somebody at 8 o'clock with a history of first appointment, with a history of broken appointments. You see, excellence and anatomy of amazing days is no accident. It's not random. Even after 4 decades of doing this, I know the importance of that very first patient on the schedule. And I know that if a patient has a history of breaking an appointment, there is a high probability that they will break a second appointment. It's just the way the world works. It may take you a couple years to find that out, but in scheduling appointments, that is a absolute, to me, fact. There are people in your practice that will never break an appointment. That if they feel they've let you down, it's an ethics thing. I'm not kidding. And there are people, God, it's really nice out this morning. I'm not going to that dental appointment. Do you get me? You look next time you have a broken appointment, and I will guarantee you, unless it's a brand new patient, that there is a history of another broken appointment. And this is why I make such a big deal about it, especially, guys, in the days of post-COVID, where most of us are enjoying very full hygiene schedules, from what I hear. And so you can't really afford to have somebody at the front desk who was sloppy. When I say sloppy, I mean they don't understand the cost. They don't picture it visually that they've let the office down, that they let the hygienist down because they made a weak confirmation. And I'm telling you, in my career, I've had people that absolutely get it and take it. I always use to pick your child up at the bus stop at 2:00. Pick your child up at that bus stop at 2:00 as an example of things that my staff does that they have to do with that in mind, because nobody would ever forget to pick their child up at the bus stop. So when you confirm my schedules, I'm sorry if I sound military right now or over the top. I don't care. This is how we get to the anatomy of a great day. So when you come to the scheduler, have you ever thought about this before, the things I'm saying to you? Who is this person that's confirming your hygiene? Is it somebody that's doing multiple other jobs within your organization? Is it somebody that recognizes their position has a lot to do with a great hygiene day? Oh my God, it's everything. There's no doubt, I'm repeating myself. There's no doubt to me that if I had a chance to talk to one of you, any of you, one-on-one, and I said, how's your hygiene schedule? And you told me, well, we get a lot of breaks, I'd be able to fix it if you'd listen to me. Is this person underpaid? Maybe you don't know how important this position is. Maybe you need to recognize, you, the doctor, the manager of your office, this is a key position. Think of the loss of revenue that you endure throughout a year if you're okay with, a blown out hygiene schedule, which I'm sure happens to many of you. It doesn't happen to me. And it doesn't happen to me because I'm vigilant. I'm just being honest. So they can't leave messages on a machine. They can't leave somebody, and it happens. It even happens in my practice. They can't put somebody to open the day that's broken appointments, unless you have a brand new practice and you haven't been able to establish records and stuff of patients and get a vibe and a feel for a patient yet. But after a year or 2 or 3 times through your practice, through hygiene recall, you should get a picture of who you can trust and rely on. What about a backup plan? I'm not kidding you. One of the things we talk about in our morning meetings, which we haven't even discussed, is there a backup plan? How about if you had a 2-hour hygiene visit for somebody who needs scaling and root planing, and they break? Do you even think like that? You need to. What if this person breaks? Is there anybody in the office already in another schedule? In fact, do you even know who's overdue? I guarantee you some of you don't. Do you even know who's overdue for hygiene that could be in an associate's chair that day? Now, maybe the timing won't work out. Listen to me. There are clearly times when I just can't fix it. But I assure you, it is never, ever because I haven't prepared the way I'm preparing for you, the way I'm talking to you right now. And even when I do all of that, there is indeed a backup plan. Okay, so that's hygiene. That's how my hygienists are able to produce and bring big numbers to the table, because it starts at the top with you, doctor. It starts with you recognizing this is a big deal. And who do you have in place, because you're not doing it, to execute the confirmations on those schedules tomorrow? And I'm talking about one. I mean, I have 3 hygienists 3 days a week in my office. And so it is a big deal. And it is a hard job, man. I am sure anybody listening in your office right now that does this job would appreciate the fact that I recognize it's one of the hardest jobs in the office because you're jiggling and juggling. It's cancellations are indeed a part of an everyday practice, but there are ways to minimize open schedules. And you just got to ask yourself, are you truly paying attention to that? The second thing I want to talk about, of course, is then the clinical schedule, the doctor's schedule. Now, this is important that if you don't understand me, that you care enough to write to me and have me explain something further that I'm about to say. So the truth is, a productive doctor's schedule absolutely starts at case acceptance. Bear with me for this. If you're not doing, which is another reason for you to reconsider this, a comprehensive approach exam. There are too many podcasts in the last 3 years for you not to have seen this. You can go back to my very first 5 or 6 podcasts 3 years ago because I remember doing it deliberately, not knowing how long this podcast thing would go on. I do. And I broke it down, and I'm not going to do it on this particular podcast because I've done it ad nauseum, in my opinion. But you got to be honest with me right now. I'm trying to tell you how to enjoy the anatomy of an amazing day on my level of what I'm used to, or even your level. To me, your level would be the most you ever produced, or the most you ever produced. And when I say that, I don't mean helter-skelter production. I mean an organized flow that when you were finished that day, you had a good day. And your office manager said, "Do you know how much you produced today? Or how much we collected today?" And naturally, that begins and starts with case acceptance. So that's a talk for another podcast or for you to go back to. But naturally, it starts with that. And if you do a comprehensive care exam where you look at the patient came in because a specific chief complaint, almost always, it's a gift when they say to you, "I know I haven't had a good exam of my mouth and I know things are all over the place or bad." That's an absolute gift. Okay, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the patient that broke the upper right molar, and that's why they're there. And that's the patient, because of your philosophy of care, because of what you aspire to be as an oral health care provider, that you are going to provide a comprehensive exam that's going to encompass way more than looking at their upper right tooth, because it's the right thing to do. That's why you're going to do it. It's the right care to do. For the 100th time, how could you possibly decide what to do with the broken upper right tooth if you don't know the rest of their mouth? It's simply not good dentistry. It's certainly not good medicine. And I don't know how we can really even get into, on any level, a dispute of that fact. You have to look at their soft tissue health. You have to look at their occlusion, where you maybe have to open vertical. You have to look at their missing teeth, and is that a factor? Maybe they have other needs that they don't know about that might have impacted what they could afford to do on this upper right broken tooth. If they knew that, I know it infiltrates almost every podcast I say, but there's never enough reminders that could be sufficient. If there were, everybody would do dentistry this way. And that is this: what you and I treat every day is usually asymptomatic. You can have advanced gum disease and it doesn't have to hurt. You don't need me to convince you of that. You can have a maloccluded, collapsed vertical of dimension and as a patient, have no symptoms. Nothing. They don't even know what you're talking about when you use those terms. In fact, you can have large carious lesions, periapical lesions, that have invaded that patient's pulp, gone through the root structure, and created a periapical abscess, and they don't even have any idea that it's there. Am I making this up? So then how could it not be the responsibility of us? Because we chose this profession. It'd been a lot easier if we chose dermatology. Everybody knows that they itch. Everybody knows that a mole doesn't belong somewhere that wasn't there before. Okay? Everybody knows when they go to the primary care physician that they have a fever. That's why they went there. But not you and I. Nope. We chose a profession where a lot of the stuff doesn't hurt. And because so many of our colleagues are okay with the insurance companies determining how much care our patients can have, that we look like the aggressors when we're trying to provide good oral health care. I know I say this on a lot of podcasts. I don't care. It can't be heard enough. You have to be totally convicted in certain philosophy of your care. You guys got to be. And sometimes that takes the first year, 5 years, or 10 years of a career. It's the same thing, by the way, with direct or indirect restorations. You go next week and you see a patient that's got an MOD-L subgingival. There's no doubt in the world that a core buildup, excavation of caries, core buildup, full coverage crown would be a better service to that patient. Or a gold inlay, by the way, or onlays that I bought heavily into in the 1990s because of my friend Bill Strupp. And if you don't believe that, then you're never going to treat patients that way. And I will tell you, there will be patients when you recommend that care because that's your philosophy of care, because you believe, not because of the money, because you believe that's the best care for that patient. I know I've said it before. When I look back at a lot of the patients that I treated in the 90s and the early 2000s, without exception, almost every gold restoration I did, inlays, onlays, pin onlays, 3/4 crowns, is as good a shape as it was the day I put it in. And we all know this is true. Why don't we do more of them? Why do you struggle with gigantic composites that leak? Certainly more than gold. Why do you do that? Well, because number one, you have not adopted a philosophy that you believe in with that. Number two, it's intimidating to you. I get it. To convey that philosophy to a patient. So let's just stop there for a minute. What I would do if I was you, I would take a couple courses in this arena, even gold, by the way. You know, I haven't looked in quite a while to see if there's gold courses out there even, or if there's a PJ Tucker Study Club, that was a gold club. It may sound nerdy and geeky. Those guys care about dentistry, I'll assure you. They care at a high. They are Lionhearted dentists. And really, and I'm going to, this is obviously going to be a 2-part podcast on the anatomy of an amazing day, but you can see what's happening in my conversation is that part of the anatomy comes from your philosophy of care. A full gold crown or a full coverage crown, whether it's zirconia or Lysipress or whatever you're using, certainly costs this patient more than a 4-surface composite. And if you haven't taken the time to develop a philosophy of care, by the way, I think this is a good podcast. Sometimes I get into it and I get into what I'm saying because it's so true. You can hear it. You can feel it in how I'm talking to you. I mean, my mecca in life isn't marketing. I did a couple podcasts on that a few podcasts ago. I like it. I think it's extremely important what you brand, but I'm talking to you about something right now that's your blood and my blood. It's our skill. It's our passion. It's what we do. And if you don't believe in that or need to take more training to believe in it, by the way, take Bill Strupp's course. If you're on the East Coast in Florida, get down there October 1st of 2023. Bill doesn't even know I'm saying this. I wish he would, because I love the guy and I love his partner, Mike Brum, because they stand for so much good in our profession. It'll blow your friggin' mind. It'll blow your mind. It'll change your approach to how you'll restore teeth. Quite honestly, more than I can from these podcasts, because I don't have the time or to show you the clinicals that go with that. And quite honestly, there's too much for me to talk about to just dwell on that. But trust me, write to me if you don't know what I'm talking about right now. But obviously, your philosophy of care has everything to do with the anatomy of a great day. If you're doing gigantic fillings all day, then no, you're never going to have. No, if a tooth needs a two-surface restoration, I'm telling you, in the 90s, if it was posterior, it was gold. Did I lose patients? I probably did. Is that work still there? Am I proud of it? Yeah, absolutely. Would you be proud of it to look at your work in 2045 and see work you did in 2023 and 24 and look back in hygiene? You can't appeal and please everyone all the time, especially about what I'm talking about right now. You got to define. You don't have to define it your first year in practice. You have to define what you are going to stand for as a clinician, what you are going to believe in. It just so happens that this is an important statement, that when you believe in indirect restorations, for the most part, obviously patients need two surface composites on 6 through 11, 22 through 27, or even on any tooth. And you can't get the patient to do an indirect restoration like gold or even a ceramic inlay or onlay, then fine. Not everybody's going to do that. But when you don't even have that, when you only do a crown because the tooth is broken off and even you can't work your magic to do a 7-surface composite, well, then that's not good enough. That's not the trajectory I'm hoping you take in your career. So we're going to pick this back up next week, but I want to recap what I've said to you. I've talked to you about the anatomy of a great day. How does that happen? And part of all of our practices, certainly mine, is hygiene. So I spoke to that. I spoke about the importance of the confirmer and the rules that must go around when confirming an appointment. I didn't even get into this podcast the importance of having a recall program in your office where your staff is going after people that are overdue in the last year or two, because that's the best time to get them. If it's beyond 2 years, it's hard to bring a patient back in. And I have 3 people, of course I have 18 to 20 at different times work for me, that I pay, that I bonus. If you want to know more about that, you have to write to me to recall patients, to bring them in. So there's abundant people to put in, patients to put in hygiene. So I talked about that, and then I started to talk about, well, how about clinically? And I got a lot more to talk about, and I'm going to pick that up next week on how does the clinic portion, which starts with case acceptance, fit into those amazing days. And I think you're going to want to hear it. Have a great week. Please keep listening. It inspires me. I'm on your team, man. I'm the one rooting for you. Thanks for listening. See you next week on the Lionhearted.